Bill Foster is an ordinary man.
Where you going?
Going home.
Not this way or not.
Why not?
Metro Rail construction, that's why not.
Living in the everyday world.
I don't suppose you have a couple of bucks you can give me. It would really help me out. If you give me your address, I'll mail it back honest.
A patient man.
Can I help you?
Yes, I'd like a ham and cheese omelet, and a little wham fries.
I'm sorry.
We stop serving breakfast at 11:30.
Okay, so today I want to analyze a brilliant movie I just saw yesterday, and the movie is called Falling Down. Michael Douglas in the main role portrays a man called Bill Foster. He's just an ordinary American patriot, and like he himself says in a movie, he did everything society told him to do. He found a decent job, he had a beautiful wife, children, but then one day he's fired from his job and his wife left him. And that's when he starts going downhill. He kind of starts slowly drifting towards madness and towards the abyss. And let us for a moment return to the 1990s, early 1990s. It was a time of American triumph over communism. The Soviet Union just fell, communism just fell. The American economy was doing better than ever, or at least on the surface it was. This movie reminds us that actually in the early 1990s there was a recession that was caused by a lack of regulation on the loan industry. And it was also quite ironically caused by a lack of defense spending after the end of the Cold War. And our protagonist, Bill Foster, is one of those guys that produced rockets for America, and now after the Cold War he is suddenly jobless. He finds himself without a purpose in life, and to make things worse, his wife leaves him for his violent behavior, and there is a warrant against him, and he can't even see his daughter nor his ex-wife anymore. But somehow Bill Foster is able to take it all until one day he enters a store with a Korean dude that's selling beverages. And all he wants is just to buy a Coke on a hot day and find refreshment and comfort in this cold beverage on this hot day. And he realizes that the prices went up, and that due to corporate greed, a bottle of Coke is now 85 cents. And that's where he actually loses his mind and becomes a violent man. He just takes a baseball bat and starts smashing all the products that are, according to him, Bill Foster, too expensive. And when the Korean dude tries to stop him, he smashes him on the head with a baseball bat. And when the Korean dude starts begging him to just take the money and leave, Bill Foster just looks at the dude like he's crazy and says, "Why the hell do you think I'm a thief? I'm not the one charging 85 cents for a fucking bottle of Coke." And yeah, that's actually how the movie starts. And after this, in my opinion, quite hilarious beginning, the movie becomes a dark odyssey of an ordinary man that's just drifting towards madness and towards the abyss. And in this weird odyssey, he encounters pretty much every systemic problem in American society. After encountering corporate greed in the very beginning of the movie, Bill Foster enters a Latino neighborhood that's full of criminals that try bullying him, but it doesn't really work well for them, because they encountered a man that has nothing to lose and therefore isn't afraid to let's say draw first blood. Then after that he actually encounters a black guy that's protesting in the street because the banks are refusing to give him a loan. So Bill Foster now experiences systemic racism. And then after that he enters this, I believe, huge McDonald's that's also located in a poor neighborhood, and he decides to order a burger because he sees a picture of a kind of perfect juicy burger on a giant billboard. But once the burger arrives, he also has a mental breakdown because he realized that the burger you see on the picture is nothing like the real product that they're selling to people in this poor neighborhood. And at one point in this movie, Bill Foster also encounters a neo-Nazi that at first sees him as an ally and actually shields him from the police because he believes that Bill Foster is a racist because he committed a crime in a black neighborhood. But Bill Foster actually calls the guy a piece of shit and tells him that in a free American society he has the right to call him a piece of shit and disagree with him, and that's where the situation escalates, and I won't spoil what happens to you. But and yeah, that's what I found very interesting about this movie. Bill Foster, on the one hand, he's a psychopath. He's stalking his ex-wife. He's trying to desperately to see his child, and that's illegal because he was prohibited by the state because of his violent behavior. So yeah, on the one hand he's a psychopath, but on the other hand he has a strict moral code and he sympathizes with all the oppressed and downtrodden in the American society, and as he says in the beginning, he wants to stand up for the right of the consumer. In this cold and cruel capitalist dystopia, he is the one standing for the consumer, because yeah, there is something, I would argue, morally wrong with a bottle of Coke being charged 85 cents, and in a way he represents this anger that many of us feel at the system, but we do nothing because at the end of the day, you as an individual, you can't do much. But in this aspect he kind of reminds me of Don Quixote trying to change the system by just smashing a can of Coke with a baseball bat. It's kind of the modern equivalent of Don Quixote charging at the windmills. And yeah, why compare him with Don Quixote and not some other character? Because, well, both characters are, in my opinion, a interesting combination of crazy and actually noble. So on the one hand, Don Quixote is also just harming innocent people, for example by destroying random objects because he believes they are magical giants, in the same way in which this guy, well, he achieved nothing by destroying a random store. But at certain points in this movie he actually does stand up for the little guy and he actually does save the day. But all in all, he is spiraling down towards the abyss, towards darkness, towards losing his mind, and towards just becoming a complete psychopath. But what's brilliant about this movie, at the same time we are following an old cop that convinced himself that he needs to retire because he's no longer necessary, and his wife also wants him to retire. But by trying to solve this case of a weird vigilante, Bill Foster, played by Michael Douglas, this old cop actually realizes that he is not too old for his job, and that he still has enough courage and reason and instinct. His old instinct comes back, and he realizes that he actually is able to protect and serve just as all cops are supposed to. And what I like is that on the one hand we are presented with a very realistic and dystopian version of American society. We are shown that the system is screwing the little guy, and we are presented all these problems, from crime to dangers of neo-fascism and poverty and systemic racism, but on the other hand we are presented with an idealist cop that truly likes his job and truly wants to protect the innocent from the crazy and psychotic people, and Bill Foster is one of these characters that kind of forces this cop to realize that actually his life does have meaning, and that actually he's not too old to protect the innocent. And these two story arcs are contrasted in a brilliant way. We are following a man that's losing his purpose in life and is just becoming some weird version of a modern Don Quixote vigilante that also ends up in many aspects hurting the innocent, but sometimes even protecting them. And whether or not he's a force for evil or good is left to the audience, although I would argue that he did more bad than good in this movie, Bill Foster did. But his story in contrasted by a diametrically opposite story, by a story of a cop that starts feeling pointless and lost in life, and at the end of the movie the cop actually starts believing in himself, and that's a beautiful message. And I won't spoil the movie for you, but I definitely recommend you to check this movie out, because this movie was in many ways ahead of its time, and the movie Matrix actually popularized this idea of an ordinary guy kind of beaten down by the system, desperately trying to leave the Matrix. And I guess this was kind of a much more brutal and pessimistic but also dark humorous version of Matrix, in which an ordinary guy decides to leave the Matrix, metaphorically speaking, by committing random acts of vigilante justice all across America. And yeah, that's all for this video. See you in the